Hello, and welcome to this edition of Spirit RX Podcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. I'm Dr. Luke, quantum chiropractor, and this is Dr. Michael, naturopath extraordinaire. We love to integrate best practices of modern medicine with ancient remedies and modalities. And this podcast will explore contemporary health and wellness topics with a blend of wisdom, humor, and practical tips for the everyday person. If you want to learn more about our stories, our businesses, how to connect with us, please click on the video links below. Let's jump in. What's our topic for today?
So today we are talking about video games.
Yeah, video games. That seems
I
like
don't
a
know if we
weird
gave it a
topic,
name.
right?
Did we give it a name?
I don't know.
We're just going to say we're talking about video games because we want to talk about video games. It's fun.
Video games, are they good for you? Are they bad for you? Since we are talking about a health show, how do video games relate to our health? Yeah. So this is like a big topic because it might seem like, oh, that's just something that teenagers do in the basement, but it's bigger than that.
It's a lot of things teenagers do in the basement.
What are some of your thoughts on this?
All right. So I'm going to start with a story.
Yeah,
I know I told this story before when we did our little short interview, but I think that I'll go into a little more detail. So I had I believe 15-year-old young man come see me. This was a number of years ago. And he was just completely exhausted. He couldn't do his homework. He was just super tired all the time. And his parents were convinced because they'd seen so many pediatric physicians and a lot of other doctors. And they were just like, this needs to be something else because we don't know what it is. And long story short is that they really thought it was an infectious disease, which is why they were coming to see me. And they had a referral from a pediatric physician. We required this for these kids.
Okay.
And basically what we did is we did a really deep dive into all these possible infections, and we actually did find a possibility of one.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking, okay, we're going to treat this. We're going to do some herbs and just try to get some vitamins on board and see if we can't get him feeling better. And during the interview process, when we were talking, I said, tell me a little bit about your sleep patterns. Of course, I dive into that.
Sure.
And I said, do you play computer really late at night? Do you play video games? What do you do? And he denied it. He was like, no, I go to sleep. But it clicked something in the parents' head because I didn't see him for a while after that, after I put together this whole plan. And what ended up happening is they came back sometime later, and I feel like they just met with me just to tell me what was going on. It was an interesting experience. Yeah, he's still a little tired, but he's going to school now and he's doing great. He's feeling really good. And I was like, what changed? What happened? And I'm thinking they're going to say, oh, was this herb or this nutrient or something? We just noticed a big spark. And no, instead, what happened is they said, when you were talking to us about his sleep patterns, we realized that he has a video game system. He has a computer in his room. And we caught him one night, like early morning and early in the morning playing video games all night long. And he was, of course, super exhausted, didn't want to go to school. And he was doing this consistently. So video games can be, point of all this.
Yeah, can be very detrimental.
Very, very addictive and hard to turn off if you really love playing them and you have one in your room and you just play all night long.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, anybody in our audience, any parents out there that have teenagers, you probably have gone through a similar kind of scenario. And because video games they're very enthralling. I could use the word addictive because that sometimes can apply here, but a mom can come through and say, hey, I want you to help me bring in the groceries. And then the person playing video games is like, yeah, hold on, I got to finish this campaign or whatever. And the next thing you know, it's been 20, 30 minutes. Ice cream's melted out in the car. And then now we have this conflict, this parent-child conflict, because why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And it's, no, I need to finish this task. And we all have that in us that we want to finish what we're working on before we go do the next thing, especially teenagers. And then, like you say, you get into the middle of the night and you get enthralled in what you're doing and that adrenaline's rushing. Next thing you know, sleep is totally disrupted. Then what happens is the high school calls home and says, afternoon classes, your child's asleep and we need some better participation. Yeah, there's like some cycles there where some self-discipline, those things maybe aren't totally built in yet into a young person, even a young adult. And it can really mess with the person's circadian rhythms and their interactions with other people. So there are some definite negatives. If some of you in the audience have experienced some of these kind of things, please post about that. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Something I'll bring up before we hop into some of these other topics here real quick. So my son loves video games, my youngest, and he is definitely more of the type that gets like just really attached to it and doesn't want to
Yeah.
turn it off.
Yes.
And I'll give you a great example. So dessert, right?
Mhm.
Most people, most kids growing up, I know I was this way. When dessert was in front of you, you were excited, you were
Right.
going at it. And you could literally set a dessert in front of him and it'll sit there for an hour while he plays these video games. It'll just sit there.
It's like a
And he
tunnel
won't pay
vision.
attention. It's like he's so
Yes.
wrapped up that even the call of sugar, which is in its own level of
Different
addiction,
addiction.
yeah, is not enough to pull him from the magnetic draw of that video game, which is really tells you something about the powerful effects that these games can have on kids.
Yeah, and I think parents always have this struggle, right? If with your teenagers, you want them to become autonomous and to take responsibility, and you don't want to be like in their rooms and put cameras in there and over hyper vigilant supervision. But by the same token, it's that trust but verify kind of thing, because they do need guidance in this area as well as other areas. Yeah, let's talk about that. There's these negatives. What are these negatives to gaming that might show up in a person that comes in the office, like the story that you just told, or maybe it shows up in some of the family dynamics?
I think there's negatives and positives.
Sure.
Video games, first off. And the first thing that I'll say in that regard is from a health perspective, video games do have a positive effect in one aspect, in that it helps task completion in kids.
Sure.
It can help them become, actually, depending on the video game type, more focused. But it also has this other side to it where when people play it too much, or the certain types of games, it can create that massive adrenaline response that can lead to stress-induced physical changes.
Yes.
And that's neuro changes, but it can also create like insulin resistance and other issues just from ongoing stress. Do you play video games at all? Played any?
In the past, maybe a little Madden.
Okay. That's actually a fun game.
You got to discipline yourself because you only have so
Right.
much time, and you don't want to spend all your time doing that as opposed to the other things in your life that you want to do. But that can certainly be enjoyable.
So I think that's a good thing. We'll get back to this, but I think that would be a great thing to talk about is how can we utilize video games in a positive way? And what are
Right.
some ways that we can discipline ourselves?
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely.
think on that. You
Yeah.
can think on it.
I wanted to touch base on this because some people might say video games, health, you're stretching it. But if we look at the ICD-11, which is like the official coding for different disorders, there is a disorder called gaming disorder. You can be diagnosed with this, and there's impaired control due to gaming. There's markers drop in family, social, educational, occupational metrics, and it absolutely affects your health. And this is a legitimate diagnosis now that has popped up in the last 10 years. So this is a real thing, and we don't want to make light of it. So I would say if parents, if you're the one with this, there's elements of this that need to be paid attention to. And some other things like I'm noting that just from the research I've looked at, like here's some terms that kind of go with this idea. When you go down that rabbit hole too far, just like anything else, there's escapism, social dependency, negative social interactions, too much screen time, dopamine, desensitization, because you are getting a reward. Your brain doesn't know the difference of you helping the old lady across the street and feeling good about that versus you're in the video game and you're winning. To your brain, it's all the same. Things like gambling, gaming can fall right into that same category as addiction.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the things I think about too is how you can develop Popeye thumbs.
Yeah.
They can get really enlarged just from playing
Right.
video games. I'm just
Yeah.
joking.
And have you noticed that there's like a whole bunch of stuff, like you can get special controllers and keyboards and chairs and the whole 9 yards. People really get into this.
Super into it. And so this is where I'll focus with this because
Okay.
we're talking about negative health effects.
Right.
sitting for long periods of time. Video games, generally speaking, not all of them, because there are definitely some interactive video games
Yes.
like the Wii, where you can get
Yeah,
the
exactly.
exercise. But sitting for long periods of time is directly associated with a decrease in health span and lifespan. And so you need to be up and you need to be moving. And the idea of sitting all day and playing video games, whether it's with your thumbs or whether you're doing some sort of alternate reality.
And adults have the same issue, right? Like if you go to work and you have a desk job and you're sitting there, you're in a flex position, sitting at your workstation all day, bent over, head down a little bit, working on your computer. And then if you come home and either sit on the couch in a flex position or you're gaming or whatever, too much flexion is bad for you, just as what you said. So this principle applies to everybody, not just to someone doing gaming. And I certainly don't want it to seem like we're trying to pick on teenagers here, because
No.
gaming is not limited to age or gender. So this is a big deal. Let's like break off of this a little bit now, because there's different genres of video games that a person might play.
So here's the question. Are
Yeah.
there better video games than other video games?
Yeah, I love that question.
I would say that there definitely are. And I think you actually sent me the article on this. So I'm going to let you dive into it a little bit more. But what I'll say is the video games that I have come to recognize that I really enjoyed in the past are things that as I get older and deal with stressors in life in general are harder for me to play. And I think as a kid, when you're more resilient, you're more likely to be okay in those high stress kind of first person shooter games.
Right.
But as you get older, generally speaking, those stressors get harder for us to deal with. And as you do it longer, the negative health effects get harder for you to deal with. So I would say my personal opinion is they can be fun for short bursts of time.
Good.
But
I like that.
First person shooters are probably the ones that cause the most stress.
And that's probably the one we think of the most when we say video game. We think of teenage boy in the basement doing a first person shooter game. And there's a lot of that. Don't get me wrong, but that's not all we're talking about. Just some different genres, just doing a real quick internet search: shooter, fantasy, role-playing action games, gambling.
I didn't even think of that one.
Sports, like Madden, for example, puzzles. Now, like, puzzle games can be really good, right? Because you're stimulating the brain. You want to try to offset dementia. Doing a puzzle video game can be an awesome thing. So COVID came along and really changed the landscape of video games and where we are now, because all of a sudden we're in lockdown, and a lot of places there was no school or some fashion of school online. And so now we've got all this time on our hands, especially with kids and adults, and video gaming exploded during COVID. And there's also this fork in the road at that time between the kinds of video games that are out there. So it goes down into two forks. One is more the competitive kind, where there's one person that's a winner or one group that's a winner, and you're trying to destroy or take down something. And the other side is where there's like more community and we're trying to cooperate to build or achieve something.
Yeah.
Especially that second kind that I'm mentioning. Some people call it cozy games. It's like kind of a genre group now, its own little group. That really took off during COVID, because if you've got let's say a third grader at home, you don't really want them put a rifle in their hand and let them shoot all day. So coming up with creative, collaborative, community type games, that really took off. And so now there's a whole bunch of research that's come out about cozy games specifically. And let's talk about the benefits that are showing up now because of this.
I'm going to go into that really quickly, but I want to mention this because you brought this up and it just came to mind. In the past, you were referring to miracles and how there's a time component to miracles, right?
Often.
Well, the thought just came to me that these cozy games versus these first person shooters or competitive games, there's a time component there.
Right.
So in other words, these highly stressful games often tend to pushing you to sit yourself within a certain period of time,
Right.
making you go really rapidly to do something.
Right.
Whereas these cozy games are working on your own timeline. You're just taking your
Right.
time, enjoying digging up the fruit or whatever you're doing in the game. And so I think that there's a side to this that when we rapidly change something, when we push our time to happen really quickly, right, that can be a stressor on our bodies, especially if pushing ourselves beyond our capacity. That's a good thing in some instances, but in this instance, I would say long term, it can have negative effects.
Right. Just if you're in the workplace, deadlines can be good, right? But if they're a little bit unrealistic or you can just barely achieve them and you push yourself to do it, and then as soon as you achieve it, they give you another one that's identical kind of stress, like long term, that's going to lead to burnout. And you're not going to like that job very long because it's just too much push. When you're younger, like you say, you're a little more resilient and you're able to do those things. And it's fun.
Mhm.
If the roller coaster bouncing up and down seems a lot more fun when you're 18 than it does when you're 58.
Yeah, I think I learned that issue when I was like 18. Suddenly I was like, oh, I don't feel so good.
So let's mention some specific games that might fall in this cozy game category.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the big ones is Animal Crossing.
Right.
That one's awesome.
Right.
One of my favorite games as a kid, I'll bring this up because I
Okay.
know no one's probably going to be aware of this, but it was definitely a cozy game.
Okay.
Such a chill game. It was called Pokemon Snap. And you would travel along. The game just moved along. It was an N64 game, I think.
Okay.
And you just moved along on a little train or a bus or something. And you had
Right.
to take picture of Pokemon running around outside. And they would get into a certain like position. You go snap.
Yes.
And you just go through the whole scene.
Right.
And you're looking for Pokemon. At the end of it, it would rate your pictures. And so it was still like a competitive thing.
Right.
You were just chill, like on a train or whatever, taking pictures.
Gotcha.
So I love that game.
And there's a Pokemon one. I can't think of the name now as you're mentioning that, but you might go to this park near where you live, right? So you physically drive to this location,
Yeah.
and there can be certain ones
It's on your phone.
you can capture on your
totally-
phone.
yeah.
And so then anyway, young people might go there and there's 20 of them on their phones roaming around the park. And on some level, that can be really cool because there might be some interactions that
And you're
happen there.
active. You're active
And
while
you're doing something.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a little competitive though as well, but yeah, that's another example. So if you go to a park and you see a bunch of kids with their phones, they might be doing an activity like that. You mentioned Animal Crossing, which is a great one. Harvest Moon is one that's been around a long time and it helps set the pathway for that. A couple more that are big. Spiritfarer and Rootersville is supposed to be a really big one. Now, I'm mentioning these names without having directly played them, but these are some of the top games that are showing up in that cozy game category. If you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, do you have some cozy game favorites? I would love to hear if you like these or some other ones. I want to hear about it. Drop a comment for us and let us know. We'd love to check it out and see.
I'd probably go.
Yeah, we'll go play
My
it.
kids and I.
Yeah, 'cause that can be a really awesome thing to have interaction with your family members, especially if family units get separated as we move around the country a little bit more. I'll tell you, this is a true story. I have a friend that he is probably in his 30s now. And when he got married, some of his best friends were gamers in his gaming community that he had done games with regularly, weekly for years and years. And some of them were in different countries and they came in for his wedding. Isn't that so awesome? So they would periodically meet up. So these are friendships developed online through gaming and like really deep friendships, even though they didn't spend as much time face to face as one might think a traditional relationship would be like.
Yeah, I think some of those like role playing games where you're in teams and you meet up at a certain time, like I know World of Warcraft was very popular in that way. And people really got to know each other really well. And they got to be friends and they team up and go fight battles. And there's a lot of good things. One of the things you mentioned on here, and I want to bring this up, is this concept of escapism. I think that there's a side to that too, where you can have benefit of escaping from harsh realities, difficult things that we're all dealing with. And so there is a positive to that. However, oftentimes how we become tempered and better in our lives is when we walk through the fires. And I think it's really important that people don't just run away from things and escape into an alternate reality, because here's the truth. Video games aren't getting less realistic. They're becoming very realistic. In fact, some of these virtual reality games on like the Oculus headset, they can really pull you into it and bring you there. I had a person I showed one time, there's a couple of cool games that it does. One is where you can fight Darth Vader.
Okay.
A really fun one. You have a
Yeah.
lightsaber. So that was awesome. Another one was you go up to the top of a building, you get in an elevator, and you go up to the top of the building. It's called plank, and you go out on this little plank
Okay.
and you step off. And I remember my friend like doing it, and he just didn't know what to expect. And he was like, whoa, this is crazy. Whoa. And he gets up there and he steps off and he like freaks out
Yeah.
and got really sick from it. It
Yeah.
like messed with him and in a real physical way, because it felt so real to him. Now, obviously, these are more cartoony. They're not like,
Right.
I mean, we're talking Star Wars cartoonish kind of
Right.
stuff. I think it's important to recognize the more real these games get, the easier it is to tap into that concept of escapism. And
Yeah.
got to be careful with that.
I'm going to spin that around and shift it to a positive for escape.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. A concept that people hear about all the time is circadian rhythms. And of course, we don't want to be gaming at night when we're supposed to be sleeping. That's obvious. But so circadian rhythms has to do with kind of that ebb and flow during the course of the night of your sleep. So a concept, though, that I educate people about is ultradian rhythms. That's like hardly anyone talks about that. Ultradian it's that same concept, but it's like looking at your rhythms over the whole 24-hour period. Okay, so we got those peaks and valleys that are happening. A concept that we tend to think is that all of the cellular growth and repair is all happening at night. That's not actually true. There is a great deal of repair and growth happening when we're in the little valleys of those ultradian rhythms. So there's these natural low points. Maybe it's like mid-morning where we just feel like, oh, I just feel a little bit sluggish or slow right now. Now, in our Western culture, we have this tendency, especially in the workplace with adults, to say, we got this deadline, let's power through. Get your caffeine, get your sugar, let's go. So our thought is that we'll be more productive if we squeeze out every ounce of work time that we can. But actually, that 15 to 20 minute little valley of time, if we really honored it and stepped away from our work and escaped into something else. Now, it could be a video game, of course, but it could be I go outside and I just, like right now, where we are, the trees are all blooming. If I just walk outside for 15 minutes and look at the trees, wow, this is amazing. I've escaped out of what my tasks are and I'm focused on something completely different. The amount of growth and repair to our cells is phenomenal during that time period. And actually, if we look at our work production for the whole day, we'll do better than if we are trying to plow through and go all the way.
Gotcha.
So a little bit of escapism can be a really important thing if we get smart about it. It can actually benefit our health, but we don't want to do too much of it, right? So if you're supposed to be working from home and you video game half the day away, and then you're going to stay up at night working or whatever, you're messing all those rhythms up. And you're not going to be healthy and you're not going to be as productive and your social relationships are going to suffer.
Okay, so this brings up an interesting thought, and I love that, by the way, because I'm not familiar with the concept, so that was really cool. So what about these dystopian like concepts, virtual reality or alternate realities that we can just tap into?
Sure, like you through meditation or...
No, not that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
it'd actually be a really interesting podcast. So let's remember that one.
Yeah.
We have a lot of those. But I think I mean the virtual reality headsets that we have right now. Imagine you have technology
Yes.
that you literally just pop on, and instead of, because you're talking about like daydreaming, right? With that other kind of concept, like escaping out of,
Which could also be something virtual.
Yeah.
That kind of like the Star Trek holodeck kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
I'm going to take 30 minutes and I'm going to go
down.
down to the holodeck and I'm going to recreate this world and go do it. Again, whether you literally are touching trees in whatever we call the real world, or whether you're doing it virtually, your brain doesn't know, and your body don't know the difference. Everything is still going to respond the same. So it's good. That can be a good thing.
I guess what I'm referring to is more like a matrix situation.
Yeah.
So if you have an alternate reality
So
that you can choose to be
Okay.
in, where you have complete control
So,
over
so do you
anything.
do that? Do you pop into the in and out of the matrix? Which pill did you take? The
hasn't-
red one or the
no.
blue one?
No, not yet. I haven't been able to do that yet. Though I will say that when I go to sleep,
Yes.
just as a side note,
Okay.
there's a stage that I go through, especially if I nap for some reason,
Right.
where I can close my eyes and see everything around me perfectly clear. And
All right,
with
now
my
you're
eyes
talking
closed.
third eye.
So,
Third
yeah,
eye.
yeah.
Oof,
We're getting okay. So
We
we're not
get
going to go there.
metaphysical away from the video.
I don't
games,
want to
but-
get too deep into
But
that.
these things have crossovers, don't they?
Yes,
They
do.
definitely have a crossover.
But I guess my point that I'm making with it is, with the virtual reality, is with this dystopic idea that you can tap into, what would happen to our society, right? Like, how much control would we have if the world is better in there than out here? If we're doing that escape, what would happen to our society if everyone decides just to escape because they have control over that? So the reason I bring this up is because there's a theory that we live in a virtual reality
Yes,
right now,
a holographic universe.
reality,
Yeah.
and that the reality that we're in right now could be like multi-layers deep, and that every civilization gets to this point where we invent the next level of virtual reality and we step down. So
Yeah.
it's a crazy concept. But
It's really cool to think about.
yeah,
Now, since we're bringing this up, the research article, this is really cool. So 20 minutes of meditation has this equivalent health benefits as 20 minutes of video gaming on your body.
what type of video game? The cozy games?
It's there was no,
No.
in this research article, they do not specify that it had to be cozy game versus anything. I think you could do a first person shooter game
Really?
for 20 minutes.
So time.
So
Yeah, that's
it's
intense.
just stepping out of the ordinary, and that feeling of satisfaction that you can get at the completion of that task. So video gaming is good for your mental health, just like everything. Water is a good thing, right? It keeps you from dying. Too much water, you'll drown. So we need the right amount of everything.
So now that we're getting to this point, let's talk about what are some strategies around disciplining ourselves with video games. Do you have anything?
Well, I definitely think let's choose positive. Let's choose the cozy games instead of the destructive games. And not that there's not a place for that in a person's life, but that should be a short-lived kind of thing. I think in the bigger picture, the more positive health benefits is going to be the cozy games and the things where we're building community. We want to look for that rated E, right? E for everyone.
Yeah, guys, if you are in the Call of Duty community or the Halo community, please still watch our podcast.
Yeah, don't shoot us up. Yeah, who wants that? Because we're not bashing that.
No, there's a
No,
place.
but
for it,
we're
for sure.
saying that can become too extreme as well.
Yes.
So moderation is a really big deal. You don't want to be the one that gets that diagnosis, the gaming disorder.
Right.
You can avoid it. And so video gaming can be a really positive thing.
One of my favorite strategies for discipline is to set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
And a lot of the different consoles and stuff now have like alert options on them.
Right.
Or you can set yourself an external timer.
Yes.
And when that timer goes off, you just say, okay, when that timer goes off, I'm going to be done
Right.
within this period of time. I'm done. Or you say, I'm just going to turn it off. One of the big things that I talk to my kids a lot about is if you can't turn off the game, if you can't
Right.
just like detach from it and let it go, then you've become probably a little too attached, and that can be a sign of the addiction. And so I tell them, just turn it off. And then, and they're good with it. They can totally
Okay.
let it go. at
That's
this
awesome.
point. Just turn it off.
And I think like parenting, you take a topic like a curfew, which is going to be the whole time that they're in home with you. Even when they're 4 years old, there's a bedtime, right? Now, not every parent has that kind of philosophy, and I'm not here to judge anyone's parenting style, but having some boundaries around time that a parent will impose on the child that then obviously is going to expand as they get older. That's very important. And I think that this idea of gaming and video games, I think that's important that that's also included in this. To be a good parent, I think you need to have some discussions and some level of monitoring on this because young people need guidance. They need you to be spot checking them. I'm not saying go invade their privacy, none of that, but just letting them go to their bedroom and then never going in there because that feels like you're invading their privacy can lead to a lot of problems. And grounding them to their room, you're not really grounding them. They're gonna find things to do in there. And I think actually, we all need social interaction. And while you're getting it virtually in a gaming community, we still need that face-to-face, real connection with other people. And we need to develop social skills.
Yeah.
And gaming can be beautiful, let's say for neurodivergent folks, it can be so helpful. But everyone, all of us, we all need to learn social skills, how to get along. And that needs to be modeled and role played in the real world, just as it does in the video world. So I would strongly encourage parents to give some consideration to this topic, have some open discussion about it.
Yeah.
It's a big deal and it's not going to go away. It's only going to become more. And so let's get it out in the open and let's find ways to make it healthy and positive as opposed to negative and draining and pulling families apart.
I love that. That's a great place, I think, to end. And I think we got a good.
I think this is a cozy spot to end the game, to end this episode.
I'm feeling very cozy right now. Wish I had my coffee to sip on.
Where's the Animal
Where's
Crossing?
the addiction? So thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
drop comments. So this is one that a lot of you will have some stories.
People.
Yeah,
Yeah.
give us your
All right.
stories.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.